Case closed. Mistaken identity. We're very sorry. Is there anything else I can help you with?
Good afternoon, friends. Stephen Benoon here with Israeli News Live, and today is the 16th of March, and cold day here in Texas. I thought it was warmer in Texas and Tennessee, but I guess not. And I have got three wonderful gentlemen here with me today, survivors of the USS Liberty that was attacked and nearly sunk. But these men are some of the brave survivors that went through the ordeal. You guys, many of you already know Phil Tourney. And then we also have Larry Bowen and Mo Schaefer as well on that were also on board that ship that fateful day. And so I'm going to take and Phil, since I know you've known you for a long time now, if you can start off here, and then that way too, you can help introduce Larry and Mo as well, and let's start helping people to better understand what happened that very fateful day.
Yeah, well, thank you, Stephen, for having us on. It's my honor. I know that Larry and Mo are glad to be here. They were in a different part of a ship. These guys were working for the National Security Agency, and I was in engineering. So their stories a whole lot different than mine, but it's all combined. It's all about the same. We was the same crew. They came together on that day, that horrible day that we survived, and many of them didn't, and many of them are still scarred for life, mentally and physically. A friend of ours, a shipmate, uh, Mickey LeMay, still got 52 or maybe 82 pieces of shrapnel in his body, and he's suffering from that right now. He took a fall the other day. He's got a dead foot, and he's on a walker now, so he's hurting because his when he got wounded, his foot wouldn't move right. So that poor guy's still suffering from those wounds. But you have Larry and Mo, the two of my friends, good shipmates, and we're going to be doing more of these together in the future. Three of us, maybe more, on college campuses and things like that. But everybody knows pretty much my story of the attack. The overflights. They identified us as American friendly. We asked for a destroyer escort, not once but twice. Captain McGonigal, along with Commander David Lewis, who was in charge of the National Security Group, who these gentlemen worked for, and we took over 821 rocket and cannon holes, over 5,000 armor-piercing bullets, almost a 40 by 40-foot torpedo hole in the side of the ship. Uh, our American flag was always flying. Uh, Rescue aircraft was denied, not once but twice. Our ship was in international waters. We were identified as American and friendly, and they attacked us anyway in this 2 hour bloodbath. And it was a bloodbath. It was awful. They shot up our life rafts. We only had three left. They took one aboard the boat as a trophy and sunk the other two. There weren't meant to be any survivors. And that's a war crime. And we've submitted a war crimes review. I believe it was the 205 or 207, which the Army is in charge of that, which they still haven't. They still haven't even acknowledged us or the war crimes that we say were committed that day. And we were silenced by Admiral Isaac Kidd. I know these other men were silenced by other people, and they have different stories. And so that's pretty much it for me, Stephen. So if you want to go ahead with Larry or Mo, that'd be great.
Thank you so much, Phil, too. And for just for those that are listening, it was June the 8th, 1967, when this attack took place. I was 3 years old at the time, and 34 American sailors were killed that day. 171 of them were wounded, and it is probably the biggest stain on the American flag that there has ever been, in my opinion. And sadly, it seems that these types of events they just keep happening over and over and over, whatever they can get to justify another war. And just for Mo and Larry's knowledge here too, before I go to Larry next, is that I was born Jewish, both my parents, but they were non. I was always they always said we were hooligans. So they, as my grandfather said, no, we didn't practice Judaism. We may have been Jews, but we died with our boots on. That was their way of talking about it. But so it's a lot different for me. I lived in Israel, so I've seen things firsthand, and I've had a radical change in my life as a result because of seeing the things that I've seen firsthand. And really firsthand. So even October the 7th, I've been in a suicide bombing before. There it is not feasibly possible for there to be an 8 hour stand down. It's just totally impossible. I can drive from the northern border by Lebanon all the way to Eilat in 4 hours, and you tell me that they're streaming this live and nobody shows up. I just don't buy it. So I look at the USS Liberty as really the catalyst of one of those events that have ever happened. And in the words of the former Prime Minister of Israel, Moshe Sharit's son, Yaakov Sharit, who is now 98 years old, he's still alive, lives in Tel Aviv. He actually stated that he actually said it in a Haaretz interview. He finally, at 92 years old, about 6 years ago, came out and spoke about what really happened in 1948, and it was horrible. And he had so much regrets. He said what we did was not right. So, and I think the thing is, it is the Jewish people I'm related to, yes, but at the same time, there's a lot of good Jewish people that they could make this a lot different. But there's also a side that's very bent on evil. And I think this was to drag us into a war for the Middle East back in 1967. If they could have sunk you guys, they would have rallied America behind it and blamed it on Egypt. So just my thought on that. Larry, go ahead, please.
Okay, well, I, as Phil mentioned, was a communications technician radioman. And on June 8th, I had a day watch. And that meant that I was down in Radio Research 1, copying international Morse code. Phil was topside, so he got to see the aircraft. He got to see the torpedo boats and experience it, but being down below, I just heard the noise. I didn't know exactly what was going on outside, but the position that I was setting was a manual Morse position, and I was copying radio signals, high frequency radio signals. The traffic that I had, I couldn't read because it was a foreign language, but the processing and reporting folks across the hall were able to read it. And, they came over and started taking sheets of 6-ply paper out of my typewriter after I completed a message, and they took it across the hall to process it and analyze it. I knew something was going on. It was pretty important because they kept standing behind me to take this traffic. But I found out when I went to Chow with my buddy Bob Eisenberg. Bob was a Hebrew linguist, also a Russian linguist, and he said that, Larry, what you're copying is very important. Stay on it. They're talking about a target, and they're making war plans. So they're going to attack whatever it was, whatever this target was. In hindsight, I'm pretty sure it was us, but they didn't identify the ship in their traffic. So we came back from Chow. I went back to setting my position, and my position was on the bulkhead right next to our comm center. And like I said, that was my normal day watch position. When when they called for a drill, a general quarters drill at about 12 or 12:30, the captain came on 1MC, the internal comms, and said, all right, this is a drill, general quarters. And everyone went to their general quarters station. For me, that meant that I moved up one level to the next deck, and I was able to set a position up there with other CTs, and we continued to do our mission. The drill was a chemical warfare drill, and guys like Phil had to get in their suits, their
hazmat.
yeah, and so they went out and were pretending to fight a chemical warfare attack. Like I said, it lasted probably 45 minutes to an hour, and then they secured us from the general quarters drill. I went back down to my position in Radio Research 1, and I'm going to say I was down there for maybe 20 minutes, 25 minutes, but at 2 o'clock, the unmarked aircraft came out and attacked the ship. Skipper came on the internal comms and said, general quarters, this is not a drill. General quarters. Again, everybody scrambled to their general quarters position. I went up one level to the next deck, set a position, and waited to see what was going to happen with this air attack. And I think Phil's probably told you before, the initial air attack was rockets, cannon fire, 50 caliber machine gun fire, and that probably lasted about 25 minutes. Then another set of aircraft came out with napalm and just dropped napalm on the superstructure. That set the whole superstructure as a fiery inferno. It was next to impossible to put it out. Phil tried, others tried. Some of our water hoses had been shot up by 50 caliber shells, so the water was ineffective. Phil tried to put it out with CO2 canisters, and it just wasn't working. So the superstructure stayed in flames for a long time. It takes a while for that gelatin type mass to burn out. Shortly after the napalm attack, I say shortly, everything seemed like it was dragging on for hours, but shortly after the attack, 3 torpedo boats were spotted on the horizon coming, towards the ship. And at some point after that, the skipper came back on the 1NC and said, prepare for torpedo attack. That's not something they teach you in boot camp. All of us probably looked around and just wondered what in the world you're supposed to do for a torpedo attack. I and Clyde Way decided that we would position ourselves on the deck next to the bulkhead and just brace ourselves for this torpedo attack. The torpedo boats launched 5 torpedoes. 4 of them missed the ship, but the 5th one hit an I-beam. And when it hit the I-beam, it exploded on contact, blew everything inside to smithereens. I mean, it just messed up everything. Hit us right in our comm center. The comm center, all the personnel in the comm center, I think, died. All the people in the PNR shop, the processing reporting shop, died. Our maintenance crew died. as a result of that explosion. 25 men were killed as a result of that torpedo. Clyde and I both got blown to the overhead, came back down. The equipment that we had been working with was strewn all over the office there. And it took us a little while to get our heads straight. And then we immediately went outside to open up the hatch that would allow these men that were down in this flooded compartment to come out. Mo was down in that flooded compartment. Initially, we opened up the scuttle, which is a little circular hole in the top of the hatch, and that wasn't effective. You were able to draw one person at a time out of that hole, but it was just ineffective. So we undogged the hatch and lifted that so that a mass evacuation could occur. Unfortunately for the guys down below, the ladder leading from the lower deck to safety was blown away at the bottom, but it was still intact at the hatch. So it was sturdy enough for people to climb up out of there. And I went to the front door to hand out life jackets to the men coming out of the flooded compartment. They were coming out in various stages of injuries where they were bleeding or they were all soaking wet. And I just handed everybody a life jacket until we thought we had everybody out of there. Lieutenant John Johnson and Lieutenant Bennett were at the hatch. Clyde and I were at the hatch. I think Bubba Schnell was also at the hatch, trying to get everybody out of there. And when we thought the last person was out of there, Lieutenant Bennett made an emotional plea into the room down below, asking if anyone is still alive to, yell out, pound on a pipe, do something, and we would come in to get that person. And we didn't hear anything, so we ended up having a dog down the hatch. Water was probably 4 to 6 inches from the ceiling at that time. After that, I went to the casualty collection station up at the chief's mess and helped the corpsman with triage for some of the less seriously wounded. Ernie Gallo and I did perform mouth-to-mouth resuscitation on our postal clerk, John Spicer. John had been outside fighting a fire, and a rocket came through where he was, positioned and tore up his whole left side. He was a mess, and he only lasted for about 15 minutes. The corpsman did a tracheotomy to try to get air down in his lungs after we finish our mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. But John was just, too blown apart to survive. Wow. So after that, I went outside to get some fresh air because I'd been given my oxygen to Spicer, and I needed some fresh air. I hadn't been out there very long, and a first-class petty officer, Jeff Carpenter, came by and he said, "Bowen, go back on the fantail, be phone talker." Our initial phone talker, Larry Weaver, had been seriously injured from the attack, and he was down with a doctor being treated. So I picked up the headphones. I started talking with the bridge. I could see the torpedo boats back on the horizon, and they weren't doing anything. They were just lingering back there on the horizon. And at some point after that, I don't know how long it was, I started seeing the wakes of those 3 torpedo boats headed back in our direction. I reported that to the bridge. And it wasn't long after that, the skipper came back on the internal comms and said, prepare for second torpedo attack.
Good
I'm back.
night. This
I'm back
crazy.
there on the fantail, scared half to death because you didn't have any cover back there. You were pretty much, right out in the open. And if they were going to continue to fire on the ship and launch more torpedo boats, I knew that the ship would go down and we'd all be dead. After that, it became kind of I don't know, my mind just went blank. I don't remember how I got down to the mess decks to help treating the 174 wounded. But that's what we did that night. And it wasn't until 17 hours later that the Sixth Fleet came to our aid. And that was just something that shouldn't have happened. We were abandoned when we were under attack. And 17
Larry,
hours later, before aid came, was just unfathomable.
right. Were you able to get any of the transmissions that were happening between other vessels in the area there? Did you get any of that kind of information like those that were supposed to be coming to your aid? And because I remember Phil's talking about that there was I guess one ship that had launched planes to come in defense of the USS Liberty, but they were turned around.
There were actually two aircraft carriers in the Sixth Fleet, the USS Saratoga and the USS America. The Saratoga got our distress signal before the torpedo boats came on the scene, and they launched aircraft to come to our aid. McNamara called them back, and Captain Tully of the Saratoga reconfigured his aircraft and was ready to relaunch. And he and Admiral Geiss from the America launched aircraft a second time to come to our aid. And again, McNamara got on the line and told him, to return those planes to home base. Admiral Geiss asked for that from higher authority. Well, the higher authority was Lyndon Baines Johnson. Johnson got on the line and says, I don't care if the ship and everyone on board goes to the bottom of the Mediterranean. I'm not going to embarrass an ally. Now, none of us realized who was doing the attacking until the torpedo boats came on the scene, because the torpedo boats actually were flying the Star of David. And, it was obvious then that it was Israel that was doing the attacking. So I've wondered all these years how Johnson knew if he didn't have information beforehand. And
That seems to be the reality, though, Larry, when you're dealing with something where they know that they're going to do something intentionally. Not everybody, of course, but there's going to be a small number of people that are aware that some event is about to take place, even like in the case with Israel on October the 7th, 2 years ago. A year before it happened, because I worked with the CIA for 7 years. And so I had good connections. And one of the guys that I knew that had not been out as long as I have, he calls me up one day and he says, there's going to be an event that's going to take place in the Middle East, and it'll be so horrendous that it will lead us into a third world war. And well, time kept going and nothing happened. But when October 7th came around, I remembered what he said. So I called him up and I said, is this anything about what you were talking about? He said, that's it, but I just couldn't tell you about it. Now, I mean, that's just insane. And then we find out that, yes, they had been training for a year. And I probably got it maybe 9 months, 10 months before it happened. So somebody planned it and knew about it. And I think it's the same thing with USS Liberty. Whether or not they had planned it, well, I guess they did, because they sent you guys over there and they didn't send you any destroyer escort because they didn't want anybody shooting back.
exactly. Yep. Yeah, we were sacrificial lambs.
Sad.
It
That's
was
sad.
meant to be a false flag attack. We were supposed to all die and the ship was supposed to be sunk. And it would have been blamed on Egypt. And Johnson would have been able to go in and nuke Egypt because that's what he wanted to get rid of Nasser. And a lot of information came out after the fact. I mean, years after the fact.
Right.
There were actual communications that were intercepted during the attack between the aircraft pilots and their ground controller, and the pilot said, "It's an American ship. We see the flag," and they were told to attack anyway. So that rumor about mistaken identity was just, I mean, exactly that. It was not the truth. And we
Exactly.
crew members are still trying to get the truth out to the American public.
Wow. Mr. Mo Schaefer, sir, please share with us what you have gone through as well. I love your name.
Well,
Is
it's
it for Moses?
better than Maurice, but
Exactly
that's who
right.
I am. So a lot of people called me Morris. So I had Boris, Horace, Norris. I had all these names. So I just changed it to Mo. About the time I went in the Navy, probably. But anyway, I'll give you just a little history. My name is Mo Schaefer. I was certainly on board the USS Liberty during the 6 Day War, and there on June the 8th. I was born in Ohio, raised in West Virginia. I'll tell everybody I found my way out because all the roads are one way leading out of West Virginia. So I found my way, and it's been a whole life from there, which included the USS Liberty. And from high school, I joined the Navy. I think all of us did as very young men, and we were all three children. We were 20 years old on June 8th, 1967. Nobody, as Larry said, nobody prepared us for battle. Nobody prepared us to be in a position. There were no signs in our country or anything there were going to be any wars. We had the Cold War going on for all those years, but I think we were pretty much at bay with Russia and all that. But we were sent out there as the Naval Security Group to watch and protect our country, and we weren't secret agents that snuck around and you see in the movies, but we were spooks or spies or whatever you want to call it. In any way that the United States or any other country gathers intelligence, we were a part of that system, and so we were sent out there to do that. And we had like 5 ships on the water at that time. One was the USS Pueblo, that in January of '68 was captured and kept by North Korea for 10 months, and they tortured 81 people on that ship. But I'll go back to after going to security school and coming to the USS Liberty. We toured the west coast of Africa most of the time, and Angola, Senegal, the Ivory Coast, a lot of these countries north of South Africa, but clear up to almost to Morocco and that area, but Liberia and all that. So we'd be out 30 days in, 2 days out, 30 into, and doing what we did. And it was a normal part of our jobs, even though we were worked on our own. We were very classified, and we didn't have any other ships around us, and we were solo all the way. And so on the week before June 8th, we were all out on Liberty one night in Abidjan. That's on the Ivory Coast, a beautiful country, by the way. And called secreted, you're going away. You're going up to the Mediterranean. You can't tell your parents where you're going. We can't tell them anything because we really don't know, except like Phil was part of the engineering crew and the ship's crew on board that didn't have access to our security spaces where we were. So when we got in there the next day and found out kind of what was going on, we had some idea of where we were headed. We weren't sure. We didn't. I don't think any of us knew there was a war going to break out, a 6-day war. That we were kind of there to say who took the first shot. I'm not going to say who took the first shot, but I think we kind of know when we know that they wiped out Egypt in a day and a half or whatever, took out everything there. And what's even more interesting is we were attacked after all that had happened. And so you wonder about the false flags Larry was talking about, and and our country being involved along with Israel. And I do want to say this though about Israel. The IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, are the ones who attacked us. Mushi Dayan and his crew and all that. And he was over there a great warrior, but he was a madman and he loved killing people and so forth. But we had no idea about any of that. But we also know we all have a lot of Jewish friends. And you yourself being Jewish, we don't have anything against the Jewish people. We have a lot against the IDF for the way this was handled and the way now we believe there was collusion with the United States and that we were planted there. We were planted in that space to be sacrificed, never be seen again. And as you quoted earlier, blame it on Egypt and gave us the right because Johnson wanted to obliterate them. And we know that Russia was out there on the waters at that time too, and they were ready to go in and take out Tel Aviv. Okay, so this was a potential of a Third World War, and it was a potential, as I'll tell you about in a few minutes, but was the potential of a total nuclear holocaust. So I happened to be stationed on the ship down in the hole where the torpedo hit. Larry was down there with me every day, but when we had a drill, he was sent upstairs above the water line where he was during the attack. But I was in that hole, and I can tell you when we ran down there, because we had that general quarters that Larry was talking about, and it went off for the true battle. We went down to our stations and didn't know what was going on, as Phil was witnessing everything going on up above. But we didn't hear anything but bullets coming through, the armored piercing bullets coming through into spaces and so forth. But still, we were, I guess, fairly safe there until it all went silent, as Larry said, for probably a 20-25 minute gap after the air attack. And then the captain did come on and say, prepare for torpedo attack. And we all said, how the hell do we do that? I can tell you, I was in the room, the actual room where all those lives were taken. And I told my buddy Jimmy, I says, I don't know what to do, but let's lay down on the floor and wrap our arms around a table leg. I didn't know. So if you take the ship and you go to the starboard side where the torpedo hit, then there was a big space where we had our linguists and we had our traffic analysis and all that in between. Then we had our bulkhead. There was thin bulkhead, a ladder, another bulkhead, and then our spaces where we were on the port side of the ship with all this massive, sophisticated equipment that we had there. And I was a Morse code operator. And so we had all kinds of massive, sophisticated equipment there. And then this traffic analysis on the other side, as Larry said, could analyze a lot that we had intercepted. And then we had a big Trescom basket on the back of the ship that we beamed off the moon to NSA every month with our traffic analysis and all the stuff that we had that was so sophisticatedly important for them to analyze. And I got ahead of myself a little bit, but that's okay. So when we prepared for the torpedo, we're laying there, and then the impact of the explosion, all we saw was massive fire, just massive fire, which was the blast. You're looking toward the side of the ship, This is so instantaneous, high, fast speed seconds, milliseconds. This is going off, but you see the flash, and then you feel the impact. You don't know exactly what's happened till everybody was probably unconscious for a second or two. I don't know how you couldn't be, because what I've witnessed lately in watching some of the recent battles we've been in, watching a torpedo hit a ship, literally hit a ship on television, it lifts the ship out of the water. It lifts the ship out of the water. So now you're a person in a 30 by 30-foot room with 12-foot ceilings. What do you think that's doing to those bodies and how it's blowing them around like toothpicks? Okay. And then, of course, then the water came in instantly after that. And by God's blessing, I'll repeat it, the torpedo struck an I-beam versus coming in, imploding, and exploding and splitting the ship in half. It went off on impact, which technically saved most of the lives on the ship, or 293 men would have died that day. So 25 died there, and the other 9 were killed on the top side of the ship with the jets and so forth, the other things that happened up there with the armored, or not, with the, what do you call it, anti-personnel weapons and so forth that hit all of them in the early stage of the attack. But some of us, there were probably 40 of us in that room, okay, that whole space down there, and 25 died. We identified one of those bodies, I think, by their facial features or whatever, out of that 25. The rest, they had to take a shoe or a belt or a name tag or whatever, because they stayed in that water for 8 days, floating around in there from the day of the attack till the day they got to Malta, to a dry dock, to put us in there. And I was taken off to the hospital. And so I know Larry stayed on the ship, and I came back on that day. But those first guys, that first group run by a guy named Ron Kukul, God rest in peace, Ron, they went in and got those 25 bodies out of that room. I went in with them like the next day. It was still a mess, but you can't imagine the horror that Larry and the team he was on that went in there and to bring out those bodies, to live with that now for 59 years and to have nobody we ever talked to trying to get medical benefits, trying to give a rat's ass about what we went through, because they all say today even, that's impossible, that couldn't have happened, you know, and then all the naysayers, it was an accident, it's whatever. So I want to go back to right after the ship, because I went on I was sent over to the Little Rock, which is the command ship of the 6th Fleet with Admiral Martin on it. And he came to the 5 of us that were on his ship, and he says, I want you young men to know that, he says, really sorry for what happened to you. We launched planes. We launched planes off the Saratoga aircraft carrier with conventional weapons to come and help you at your ship, to come and help you out there. We also launched 4 planes off the America aircraft carrier, loaded with nuclear warheads, deadheading toward Cairo. Now, he didn't have the authority to pull the trigger or anything there, but that had to be pre-planned to do that and have this goal in mind that they were doing. And of course, you go back to the planes going toward the Saratoga. By the grace of God, there's a young man on our ship, Terry Halbardier. Again, rest in peace, Terry. Since they wiped out every single antenna we had on that first strafe of that jet, everything. We had no communication. And this guy, Terry Halbardier, went out and hand hooked up a small antenna and hooked it up and got one message out. It says, under attack, believed to be Arabs. And we got one message back, that help is on the way. That's the last word we heard for 17 to 18 hours before the next morning, before we saw. So think about it. What happened, and the reason those jets were launched, is they got that word got out, and they reacted to come and help us. But Israel's radar picked up those planes coming, called up Lyndon Johnson, whatever, said we made a terrible mistake, and they called the planes back unbeknownst to us. And they ordered all the planes back and all that. And we never knew that till long after the attack, as all the stories developed. Okay. But, you know, and we do these things. This is the second time the three of us have been on. And there's so many points I've left out. And there's so many points that we all miss. And we're telling you it's because we speak from the heart. We don't have a script. You know, to kind of set the stage, and I'll be done here in just a second, but that big Trescom basket in the morning before the attack, my buddy and I were up in that, cleaning that sophisticated basket out, and we watched 5 runs of little boxcar airplanes come out with the Star of David on them, with cameras hanging out, taking photographs of our ship and so forth. But we felt, and I think Phil's told this in the story, every story he's ever told, is we felt comfortable. We felt safe because there's the Star of David out there. They're flying around. They're checking us out and gave us some peace. And they're taking all those photographs they used to wipe us out in a 2-hour window. And then to come in, when Larry talked about that second run of the torpedo boats coming back in, they came in and I don't know, Phil, what, hundreds of more bullet holes in the ship. They anti-personnel, or excuse me, armored piercing missiles and stuff they shot. And so you think everybody runs inside the ship. Okay, it's up top side. And then the armored piercing hits and all the shrapnel is what tears everybody to pieces. And they're from the metal flying and so forth. I mean, that's worse than a bullet. And so anyway, there's just so much that happened, and we all get wired up and a little more emotional as we talk about it. But we have one objective, and that's to tell our story. We can't tell our story, or haven't been able to tell our story for 50 some years because the media wouldn't allow us to tell our story. The media covered up everything. The blessings of podcasting and the new ways that media is done today that we can reach people has given us a platform. And we were very blessed to have Candace Owens and Phil reach out to her and have that come together, because that's been a huge catalyst for us. And, you know, and we ask your viewers to go to ussliberty.org. It's that simple, ussliberty.org, and see our story. We've got a beautiful new website up there. It can take you on a trip through the whole site to see about whether you want to check out our newsletters, see what happens, see our gallery of pictures and so forth that happen, see a lot of stories. More importantly today, meet our 34 crewmen who were killed, because we have their photographs, as many as we could get. I think we're missing about 7, but we have a little history on them on there. And then we're have our podcasts on there. We have our documentaries that have been done. I recommend a documentary. It's on our website called Sacrificing Liberty. It's a 4.5-hour documentary, so it takes a while, but it's done as well as a Netflix movie. And it's the crew telling the story about the ship. But so, you know, your listeners, we are counting on you to help us to tell this story. Yeah, if you want to join our organization, we welcome that. If you feel so that you want to donate, we really appreciate that. But and I got to turn this back to you, because I know I'm not sure how much time we have, but Phil,
we got
so
plenty
quiet.
of time, Mo. We got plenty of time. Seriously,
Okay. But we
it's
can
an
bring up a lot
honor
more
for
about
me.
questions you may ask.
Yes, it's truly an honor to have you men here today, and my heart breaks. It does. You bring it to life, Mo. You really do. And I do have questions I want to ask you. I mean, when you give the idea of that fire and everything, the first time the suicide bomber, I wasn't close enough. I just got knocked down from the blast. But I did make one mistake of my own when I was young. My dad, he owned a clearing company, and I had 5 gallons of diesel in a can on a bonfire, and I didn't know that that would ignite. And all of a sudden, I hear him scream because he sees what I'm doing, dumping it out. And when it exploded, it propelled me about 20 feet through the air. And all you could see, like you said, those rolling flames going around you. Of course, that's nothing like a torpedo, but um, Moshe Dayan, of course, I was very pro-Zionist for many years. So I know a lot of the history of Israel. And this interview, by the way, I'm going to send to my son after we publish this. He is 38 years old. He's a history professor. And he just won Florida's top teacher of the award for the entire state of Florida. Um, he's always listened to our broadcast anyway because I'm his dad. Now he's still Jewish. I became a Christian myself, but he still is what they call Reform Jewish. And but I'm going to see if he can't find a way to get this in the curriculum in the state of Florida for this story to be told to every class in the state of Florida. It's what it needs to be done. Um,
That would be
and those of you
wonderful.
that are listening, anyway, we've got to carry this banner on. Um, I mean, I want these men to still be around for a long time to come, but just like in the case of World War II, our veterans from that era there have slowly but surely have passed on. And I've said for years to young people that I would meet, you get your grandfather, whatever, record their stories now because you'll only regret it later. My great grandmother was born in, I think, 1887, and the stories that I would hear from back in those days, and I'm thinking, here we are in 2026, and yet, and you guys are the same. You have a relative that you remember that's born in the 1800s when they were still in horse and buggies. So a lot has happened. What I did want to ask you about, though, is, and Mo, I'll start with you, but I'd like to get each one of you to answer on this here. After the attack, and of course, you're fighting to save lives, but you've got that journey that you've got to get to Malta, and that takes time. Were there discussions, especially after you've been attacked, and you guys, Mo and Larry, you guys did the Morse code, the encryption, things like that. Was anybody disclosing at that point among yourselves about, hey, I saw the communicator, like the guy that spoke Hebrew. I speak Hebrew as well. And did he ever say, do you know what these guys really were saying on these communications? I'd really be curious to know if there's
So
any of that type of
are you
information.
saying, asking on the days between the attack and the ship getting back to Malta?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. When
So
you had that,
yeah, I was flown off to the hospital. I came back on the ship the day it arrived in Malta. Larry, you may have been on the ship the whole time. So I've never heard that there. Yeah. What did you guys discuss?
No, I mean, everything that we did was classified.
Yeah.
So, we were no longer in our secure spaces. You couldn't talk classified outside the secure spaces. So th there weren't, I wasn't a part of any discussions with any other crew members about intercepts and transcripts. It wasn't until well after the fact that we heard from an Air Force guy that was on a mission out there in an aircraft, and they actually had intercepted the comms between the pilots and the co-pilot and the ground controller. Um, those tapes were sent back to the NSA. This guy Norwicki was his last name. Said that he saw the tapes in the 70s, in the late 70s. So that information was available, and on those tapes they had those comms where they had identified us as an American ship before any rounds had been fired. uh, but they attacked anyway. So that spells any of this mistaken identity crap that's been going on for 59 years. We know that they knew who we were and they attacked anyway.
Has anybody ever done a formal request for that information that you know of, Larry?
Yes, Joe Metters, another one of our survivors, and our historian had requested, a FOIA request to the NSA, asking for the information. He got a response from NSA. I don't know if it actually had the transcripts. He sent it to me just last week. The response that he got from NSA, and I tried pulling it up through their website and their FOIA history, and I couldn't find it. So, but I'm not the smartest guy when it comes to computers, so it's I'll have to get Joe to send me whatever else he got. But it was a link to the NSA files, and apparently that's where the tapes were.
So,
What'd be nice to do is if we get a hold of these files, and then we could even, especially if it's lengthy, run it through an AI program that could actually look for key things like that and break it down, or just somebody that's got the time. I mean, we'll find the time to go through it as well. If you guys can end up making that public, because the more information we can put out, the people are the only one that's going to change it. It's just like in America right now. Our government has been overran by APAC. And, sadly to say, I mean, we've got a few good ones in there, and I'm sure there's more in there that mean well, but, it's made me so discouraged with our government because, we're not putting America first. And now we're in another war, so. And because of my days working intelligence, I know people in Mossad, I know people, you know, uh, in a lot of different areas like that. And so it's kind of crazy. But Phil,
can
what,
I add to Larry's
yes,
thing
please.
once? I'm sorry, Phil. Uh, Going much deeper, especially for your listeners, FOIA is Freedom of Information Act, so they understand what he's talking about. And after 50 years, they're supposed to release everything in the Freedom of Information Act about our ship, but they haven't. And there's a lady named Michelle Canoon out in Seattle who's been a supporter of ours, and she has spent thousands of hours with a big law firm. The law firm came to one of our reunions and spoke to us. Couldn't tell us a lot except that she's made so much progress with the Freedom of Information Act, except we're down to 360 pages that's blacked out, and they will not let us have it any way that we're fighting for, and we may never get it. But guess what's in that 360 pages? Our whole story. You know what I'm saying? The real truth about the story, the fact that it was intentional, the fact that it was probably an attack that was put together by two, with the USA being involved in this. And also for your listeners, this continues today to be the largest cover-up in the history of our country. Today, if one of you write to your congressman and ask about the Liberty, you'll get a form letter that we've been getting for 58 years. Okay, and then I'll let you get to Phil, because Phil knows so much.
He does. And he's as good looking as me.
He shaved his mustache.
I did. I'm going to grow a goatee, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Phil, what do you know about, because like you said, I know you were on the top side, and and you guys in between having to try to save lives on the way back in. Did you hear anything?
Well, yeah, what we heard mostly was between ourselves. I mean, from the crew I was in This includes anything above the water line. These guys are below the water line, and we weren't allowed to talk to these guys, and they didn't talk to us, and that's
It
a
was,
sad thing that happened, but it did. But when Mo and those guys got medevaced, and the next morning from the America, they did medevac. The USS Davis come alongside and helped us do some shoring up, which we drastically needed to even get to any port. But like we were talking about Joe Matters, and I'll digress a little bit. He's a great guy and a great historian. I just read a thing he put out today, and I commented on it. The National Security Agency for 59 years, coming up June the 8th, has not done anything for us as far as any pertinent documents. Now, Mo mentioned the 375, which could be the Frontlet 15, and that's the key to this. Frontlet 615, excuse me. The attack was supposed to happen on the 6th of June. In June on the 15th day, but they moved it up to the 6th hurriedly. That's probably why they rushed us in there so quick. But Dave Lewis, the head NSA guy that we had on board ship for his dying day, he said, Frontlet 615, if you get that, you've got everything. And, the people in Congress for 59 years haven't helped us. And they're not going to help us now. As Mo said, we get form letters back. I got a form letter back from President Clinton. We got one back, Larry and I composed just last year. We got one back from President Trump, and nothing was mentioned about the Liberty. In other words, we support our veterans. Well, they don't support the USS Liberty veterans. And you're correct. They're all APAC people. They're taking APAC money. I mean, they brag about it. Ted Cruz says it's a sin. It's calling Jews. If you say Christ is king, it means you hate kings. I mean, Jews. Christ is king is what he said. You've probably heard the same thing. And along with Lindsey Graham, he's the biggest supporter of Israel, as most of them are. But we get no help. We do this all on our own because of 34 men that were lost that day, and the men that have carried us this far. George Golden, a great guy. He was my engineering officer. There are so many more. Stan White, he was a communications technician, E9, a wonderful man. I love that guy. And so many more that have brought us to here. And we're carrying on their legacy till we can't. But it was not a mistaken identity. We were ordered. I was ordered by Admiral Kidd 2 days out at sea. He came aboard our ship. And we got us in small groups. I was in sick bay at the time, and he took off his stars, said, I'm just like your dad. Tell me everything that happened. And we did. I told him, why would you allow our ship to be attacked by Israel when we knew who it was? He says, that's none of your business. And we told him everything. He put his stars back on. He warned us never to say a word about it. And he got right in my face. Stephen. He says, do you understand what I'm talking about? Prison or worse? I said, yes, sir, I do. And he left. I don't know what he said to the other crew, but there was 5 of us in that group. I don't know what he said to Larry, because he stayed with the ship. And as Mo came back on, and he had another terrible task. I'll tell you a little bit about it. He had his brother's class ring on and had passed away. And I'll let him tell you how he found it. But to answer it all, we've been shit on by our government all these years. In fact, Mo, it took him 58 years of fighting to finally get his just due from the VA. And that's how they treat American heroes. All these guys are American heroes. The whole ship was full of American heroes that stayed afloat to tell the truth. And we'll never give up on that. The truth is, Our government set us up to sink, bring us into World War III on the side of Israel, causing a nuclear war, which would have then taken Israel would have got all the Middle East at that point, all of it. That's what they wanted. And in my opinion, that's what they want now with this Iran war. And we got to remember the people that sacrificed their lives for this war right now. And there's more wounded. I just heard today there was about 200 wounded, and they haven't come out with the death toll yet. So it all goes back to Israel. We're in a war again. That's my belief. Some people don't believe it, but I do. And the USS Liberty is the key, the very key to break the back of all this right now. The truth about the USS Liberty. That's why we survived. God saved us for this moment. All three of us together. I believe that with all my heart, and I will to the day I die. With that, I'll leave it with you. Go ahead, Stephen.
I've got a friend with the NSA, and I'm going to reach out to him and see if I can't get some pressure put on the background. And anybody that's listening, you can email me, stephenbenoon@gmail.com. Anything that we can do to get help besides also, and we're not done yet, but just remember, share it everywhere. I don't care if it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever these places are. Most young people, if you don't know, ask your kids, they know. Um, but
Let me add one thing, Stephen. I forgot.
yes,
The Board of Inquiry lasted 7 days, and they said it was mistaken identity by orders of Johnson. Now, 59 years later, come June, they say they won't release it because of national security. Now they got a 7-day investigation done. It should have taken months and months and months. And now, 59 years later, it's still a matter of national security. Why? Because they're hiding the truth. And it's just that simple. Everybody's got to understand that our government is lying to us, especially about the USS Liberty.
I'd like for Phil to make a comment. There's so much, Steve, that's happened since the attack, and that's why we're here today, because we're getting a lot of attention. We're getting attention from the Turning Point people who go out. These college kids are asking about our story and so forth. But I think an extremely important part of our story is the people who were running the Navy, the people like the Admiral that Phil told you about. But we had an Admiral Moore, who was the chief of naval operations, or the chief of all the military at one time. Ward Boston, a JAG that we had, Merlin Starling. But these guys, Phil's life was threatened face to face. Okay. Those guys were basically had the same threat given to them by John McCain Sr., or by Johnson or by McNamara or whatever, that they were never to ever discuss this. And you write down what we tell you to write down. Now, Phil, I want you to go ahead with Boston and Merlin and just quickly and about Admiral Moore.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, thanks, Mo. Admiral Starring was handed the Board of Inquiry to go over it. And he had problems with it that he didn't agree with. And the next day, they took that Board of Inquiry away from him. Ward Boston did. And he never saw it again. Admiral Tom Moore was our chief, the number one guy that supported us. He's a former chairman of the Joint Chiefs. He's also served in the Pacific Fleet and the Atlantic Fleet as a supreme commander. And he said he would never, ever, ever believe that our ship was attacked by mistaken identity. In fact, he said we looked like a giant lobster. Now, what we're getting into with back to Candace, the younger people, the Gen Z and before, in the 30s, 35-year-old group are saying, hey, wait a minute. The USS Liberty is not a mistake. And they asked people about it. In fact, they asked Ben Shapiro about it. And he couldn't, he says, what was a mistaken identity, a mistaken identity? Other people are coming out. And this is what's going to happen to us guys. We're going to end up on the stage of college campuses all over the country. And I already know that's coming. And we're going to do the same thing we do here. We're going to take questions and answers because we are the spear point of the truth for our country and the world about what really happened to the USS Liberty, and it should never happen again on behalf of any country. We owe one allegiance. That's the one flag, the stars and stripes. That's who I took an oath for, and I didn't take an oath for anybody else. And that's what I'll support to the day I'm gone. I think these guys feel the same way.
Yes,
Amen.
100%. I can only imagine. Listen, I am excited to hear y'all are going to be on college campuses because just like, I mean, Charlie Kirk, the young man was very pro-Israel but once he changed his views and started making it publicly, and I've found 5 videos already where he's dealt with different issues there, this young man ended up being silenced. And Phil, by the way, you told me from day one, even when I was still looking at a possible side hit, you said, Steve, look at the mic. Look at the mic. You know what Israel did with Hezbollah. Do you know I was going completely in that direction too? And I had found one thing I'd noticed because Candace put out a video one day and she said, look, you're right. It's not a 30-06, but it was a front entry wound. Now, because of my training with the government there that I learned how to read imaging very well. And so even an MRI, I could read an MRI. But what I noticed in one of the side views was his back of his neck right here, right at the impact. His head hasn't even gone down. You see that spinal cord bulge out and go right back down again. So I knew it was from the front. I did a rough idea of trajectory, and sure enough, it had to be from the mic in his hand. While me and Colin with Project Constitution were doing the interview, somebody posted live in there. They had gotten the camera footage from behind, and on his hand, it was all tore up from where that mic exploded. And they blacked out part of the mic where you couldn't see what happened to the mic in the imaging there. The reason I say this, as you guys said, your case is the spearhead. And why they're trying to say it's part of national security is because they've got an agenda. And that agenda is this new world order that they don't want nobody to know about because they want Israel at the head of it. And so if the truth comes out about the USS Liberty before they pull that off, then the whole United States is going to, their whole support will crumble because now they will know that Israel is involved in false flags. They are doing it. My wife, when I started revealing, I waited till over 30 years before I ever said what we did in the CIA because that's kind of the way it worked. You guys know that. If you've been out 30 years, you can blab your mouth and you don't get as much trouble. But my wife started exposing these Noahide laws that they got that Israel is trying to perpetrate over the entire world. And that, of course, if you're a Christian, you get your head cut off, right? She actually found it recently. It was used in the Supreme Court brief to overturn Roe versus Wade. Now, we've always been against abortion, but when we saw that they actually cite Talmudic Noahide law to justify it, which in that law, they don't tell you the whole part of it, for the Gentile woman, she's to be killed if she aborts a child. But if it's a Jewish woman, nothing happens to her because she's allowed to abort the child. And also, even 40 days after the child is born, she can have the child killed. That's Talmudic law under Noahide laws. Now, I have all the Talmud because I'm Jewish and I had that stuff, right? Anyway, getting back though to the USS Liberty, you guys are the spearhead. I mean, if that truly is revealed and we can get the pressure to release what's there that's hidden, or get at least the people, the younger generation, to recognize that what has happened is really true, their whole support, it's already crumbling now just because of the fact that people are waking up. They're realizing, look, Israel's in controlling our nation. I mean, Trump, the only reason he started bombing Iran was because Netanyahu, and I actually noticed this with the president of Iran, and I've got a major source from Iran, which he wanted the government overthrown, but then he tells me, he said, it's not going to do any good. He said, nothing's going to change. But at any rate, the president said while we were in negotiations, he said, Israel bombed us. He said, then the U.S. came afterwards. So that does let me know when what was it? Marco Rubio said that, well, Netanyahu was going at it regardless. We either go or we don't, and the president had no choice. So it just goes to show that Israel is still calling the shots, just like then. And how could Israel control Lyndon Johnson years ago to where he was willing to hide the fact that you guys were set up to be sacrificial lambs so that they could go drop nukes over in Egypt? And if you would, please, one of you, I know, Phil, you've said that before too, to me, they were loaded with nukes on the plane, ready to go wipe Cairo out. Please share that with us, because most of the world will never know that unless you guys tell it.
Well,
Well,
I also go
oh,
ahead.
go ahead, Phil. Nope.
No, please, please.
I had heard from an Air Force guy with the Strategic Air Command, again, well after the fact, that they had I guess it was a call at 4 o'clock in the morning. This was long before the attack, that they were put on alert for a possible operation. And they had armed their aircraft with nuclear weapons with the idea that they were going to, drop them over in Egypt. But, they never got the orders to fly. They were just in a ready room. So, but I mean, here it was 4 o'clock in the morning, and they're out in Nebraska, and they were just waiting for the call. So, we obviously knew, the U.S. government knew something was about to happen, and it was just a matter of time.
So it's obvious then that the U.S. government was going to join this war with Israel had not something got exposed about the USS Liberty, even though it didn't go out public. But it's still, I think undoubtedly their fear must have been too great that you guys were surviving. They couldn't just keep letting you get attacked, because then all the sailors and all these other ships would have known you guys went down. Is that fair to say?
Nobody would have known anything about us until way after the fact. You kind of got to go to the perspective of June the 8th, and then all of a sudden we're missing. We sink. We're missing. We're gone. All gone. And also Terry getting that one message out. That would have said something bad has happened, but that still, to me, would have led that it had to be, since there's no survivors to talk about, it had to be Egypt, and we would have potentially gone into a nuclear holocaust. And I'm saying, from what Admiral Martin, the commandant of the 6th Fleet, said to the 5 of us on his ship, I loaded 4 aircraft with nuclear warheads. We were within 9 minutes of potentially bombing Cairo, Egypt. So we came within 9 minutes of a potential Holocaust. And I'm not saying that Johnson would have ever pulled the trigger or whatever would have happened, but the Medal of Honor on our ship should go to Terry Harbaudier, because he saved all our lives, because he had the wisdom to go out and hook up that little antenna he hooked up. And, by God's grace, because how did he even know all of our other antennas were gone? Except he knew he couldn't get a message out. Nobody was responding to Mayday. Nobody was responding to anything. And he did that and got one message back. And the words "help is on the way" is what saved us.
Wow. And what was Terry's last name?
Harbaudier.
He lived with me for about a year. He worked for me, and he told me exactly the same story. But he said he took that tuning antenna off because it wasn't working, and that's probably why he didn't get hit. And yeah, he fearlessly went out there and did that, hooked it up, got the message out. But you're right, Mo. We go down. They're certainly not going to blame it on Israel. They're going to blame it on the
Right.
Arabs.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a setup deal from the get go. And I mean, this just didn't happen overnight. I mean, this was a planned deal
Yeah.
because they had us down to the gnats, everything, what they wanted to do, and they did it. And by the
Yeah.
grace of God, that ship didn't sink. And
We could have done our job, Steve, from 100 miles out, not 13
yeah,
miles out. Why would we go out there 13 miles and if we felt threatened, be sunbathing when the jets attacked us?
right.
Why would we be laying out, relaxing and doing that before this attack happened? We felt as safe as you could possibly feel, even though we could see explosions over in Egypt and all that going on. But it's just mind boggling.
Well, the other thing that I thought about as well, guys, is that when you were telling me about how that they came in and they photographed the plane, and then, obviously, what's going on then, that the analysts are taking and figuring out exactly what they need to convey to the pilots, as you said, strategically to take out. So at that point now they know where every antenna is, they know
Right.
how to make
That's right.
plans.
But they had to Star of David, so we apparently didn't expect that. We knew they were taking photographs. We knew but they're taking the photographs to go to a war room with Mushi Diane in there saying, okay, this is what we do. And you take the mast of the ship, the big mast in the front that has all these arms with antennas going all the way out. And they hit all the wires in the middle of the mast. And then every single antenna, and in two strafes of the jets, they took every piece of communications off that ship you could communicate with. That's mind boggling.
And they did
So,
it within seconds.
yeah.
That
How
that just
fast was it?
shows you premeditation, you
Completely.
know. And I'll tell you guys something. This is no joke, right? People, I know sometimes, especially because sometimes people will say, I was so pro-Israel all those years, and I'd written two books. I was known by a lot of big names in Christian ministries and stuff like that, but I was still more independent. But when I lived in Israel back in 2004, I had a guy that was his roommate of mine there, and my wife was back home, and I went over there for an extended time. I was basically furthering my Hebrew studies while I was there. And he would come in part time, and so that's why he rented a room from the house that I'd rented there. And he was going through therapy because he's in a Jeep accident, young guy, and I was about 40 years old at the time. And he said to me one day, we were talking, and we were talking about Palestinians. And he said to me, he said, "Oh yeah," he said, "we target practice on them." And I'm sitting there and I'm listening to that and I stopped. I said, "You what?" He said, "We target practice." I said, "What do you mean you target practice on Palestinians?" He said, "It helps us to get better at shooting, so we shoot them. And we just sometimes we're on the border and defense and we take and we put them in the scope and kill them." I said, "You say that as if it's no big deal." "What? They're just animals." And and that kind of stuck with me. That was probably one of the first things that really began to make me start thinking. That and when they used the sarin gas in Syria and blamed it on Bashar al-Assad, and then I found out later that no, it was actually through Hillary Clinton working with the CIA and stuff. They had smuggled the sarin gas out of Libya into Turkey, and Erdogan allowed it to go through with ISIS and to do a false flag there to kill them because Israel needed it. And then to top it off, a good friend of mine was an IDF officer. This was the second time I went to Israel with my wife, or this time she went with me. It was 2014, I guess, 2015. And there was a lot of issues going on with ISIS. We're having dinner, and he says, "Well, the ISIS militants are wearing tzitzit." I said, "They're what?" He said, "They're Jewish, Steve." He says, "We are the one that made ISIS." And I'm like, "You got to be kidding me." So I have literally lived through it. And then, of course, you get these doctors coming out of Gaza saying kids are shot in the head and things like that. I was a distinguished master of arms, and I know it when I put a scope on something, I'm not going to miss. I know what I'm shooting, and I know they know what they're shooting and killing. So when it comes to the USS Liberty, they intentionally planned it, photographed it, staged it, and they knew exactly what they were doing.
Well, thank you for helping us share our story. That's very important.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and
Larry, I think
yeah,
we got
it's
you in twice.
yeah.
So let me see if I can. That's all right. I'm not. We'll worry about that somehow or another. It just picked that up here. Let me just take it off the screen. Here we go. All right, there we go. Um, let's see here. Why do they want to? They asking me stupid questions right in the middle of our interview. Okay. Anyway, guys, I really appreciate you taking the time. And anything you guys want to share more, please. I don't want you to feel like I'm cutting you off on this time at all, because I think everything that we can possibly do. And if it's okay with you guys, some of the stuff you've got on the ussliberty.org, if I could include some things in our interview here for people to see better visuals, I would love to have your permission to do that.
Oh,
We have
absolutely,
that. We
absolutely.
have a gentleman who's our branding manager, Ray Doutster, who could send you all kinds of backdrops or whatever that you could take and look at and drop in when we're talking about something if you wanted to. And
Okay.
that may help you because it helps your audience understand the dynamics. And I'll also say to your audience too is that we are getting a huge presence on the media right now through our podcast, but also with our branding manager we've brought on. He's helping us a lot with X. He's helping us a lot with Facebook. I ask your viewers to go onto Facebook and they see a USS Liberty ad, or not ad, but it shows Larry talking about something, or me talking about, or Phil, or other shipmates, and push the word follow and ask them to become followers. And then they'll see a lot more information that comes out. And then we always appreciate the comments that come through on that.
Excellent. Excellent. We will definitely do that. And we have a very large Facebook following, so I'll make sure
Yeah.
that we publish this there. And what I'll do then, rather than just putting it out immediately this evening, then I will get with Ray here. And if Phil, if you can send me his contact to where I can get anything I can do, because like you said, if I can edit this together and include some of these imageries that as you guys talk, to give the people the visuals, that is so powerful when they hear your
Yeah.
stories, get the visual as
Okay.
well.
I
And I
didn't I
want to
didn't
see.
know. Yeah, I didn't know if Ray had already sent you anything or not. If that was the case, has he sent you anything?
I'd have to go and look intentionally, Phil, because I do get so many emails. Unless I look, I don't really know, because unfortunately, there's just too many emails that come in. So
Okay, I'll send you his contact right away.
perfectly. Thank you, guys. So any other comments, guys, you want to make?
No, other than my book's out, Stay Afloat,
That's right.
and
That's right. You do have a book coming out. That actually, it's already come out, hasn't it?
it's yeah, it's ready for purchase now. You can order it now. Uh, you can order it through the Liberty site, usslibertyveterans.org, or philtourneypodcast.com. But it's out and it's good. And I might say that the foreword from it is from a very prominent person uh, in my life, and it has been for a while. I won't mention the name now, but I'm really proud of them doing that. So I'm proud of you too, Stephen. Thank you. God bless you, brother.
Well, thank you. You guys are just so precious to me, and I am so glad that we got to connect and everything. I know my wife will be jealous. She's been on with Phil once before, so we the three of us were able to do an interview together. But my wife has been a major advocate for you guys, and always sharing everything that she gets a hold of, trying to get the word out. And And both of us have, it'll be her first time writing a book. It's my third book I've written, but I think what I'm going to do is I'll ask her as well that we put in both our books as well, a little bit about the USS Liberty, what happened for people to be able to reach out and share that story there as well. So at least where they know how to contact, just so we get it to more people. And I want to see that you guys get justice somehow in this life. I don't want it to be to where this is not resolved. I think the reason why they keep suppressing it is because, like I said, if they're going to make this new global system, Iran, according to General Wesley Clark, was supposed to be the last nation to be taken down. And but what if they're not successful? That's another thing that I know that the government is in disarray. I know that their new Khomeini guy is in Moscow right now undergoing surgery. I was able to get a lot of intel before mainstream media has ever even known about it, but he was actually in the same blast that his father was killed in, his wife was killed, and his son was killed. But he was severely injured, but they just didn't say it. They made it look like he's making statements, but he can't make statements. He's too bad a shape right now. But they evacuated him out secretly to Russia. And I know some people think Russia will get involved, things like that. I don't see Russia really getting involved. I mean, maybe as far as intel, things like that, yes, but I don't think they're going to get involved. So I think Putin is a lot like America. He's got Chabad running his back door for him too. So, unfortunately, it seems to be world over, you know. All right, guys. Well, thank y'all so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And my heart goes out to you and your families for all that. And especially, I will say this too in closing. I know that PTSD definitely comes with what you guys have gone through. And if I hadn't have seen what my wife has gone through with PTSD when her father was murdered by doctors, uh, I wouldn't really understand it to the depth other than the stuff that I've seen in the CIA. Unfortunately, I've seen too many people killed there. But, and I always suppress that my whole life. But, just like when you describe those images, unfortunately, I've seen the heads blown completely off and everything else. But thankfully, it's only been a handful of those things in life. But you guys had to deal with a carnage that few people ever witness in their lives, and that's not easy. So my heart
Amen
goes
to
out
that.
to you. So
Thanks. Good being with you guys.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you,
you
guys.
guys.
Thanks. See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you guys for listening.